All right. Hello, everyone. Let's see here. I think we should probably get started in just a second. Linda, if you would like to do a brief introduction and talk about Education USA, we're ready to go when you are.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Doctor. Guys, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. This is going to be a very interesting and amazing webinar where you're going to find a lot of opportunities for PhD, as you check in the message and also on our social networks. Today, we're going to have the great participation of Dr. Christopher Laincz. He's the director of the PhD program of LeBow College of Business and Drexel University. Professor from physics, engineering and education. And well, you know, Education USA provide you all of those kind of opportunities that universities give us. Specifically to Mexican students, not just for undergraduate, but also graduate students and professional. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope that you have a lot of questions, and please type all your questions because Dr. Christopher is so nice, and he's going to answer everything you ask for. Thank you very much, and enjoy our webinar.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. So the topic of today's webinars is about doing a PhD degree in the United States. And so we'll cover a number of different topics. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Christopher Laincz. I am faculty in the School of Economics at the LeBow College of Business at Drexel University. I'm also the director of the College of Business PhD program, and I've been working with and advising PhD students now for, let's just say, more than 15 years, and I'll stop there. As we're going through this webinar, I'll be introducing my colleagues in just a moment, but if you have any questions at all, please call up the chat function and use the chat function. We'll be more than happy to answer questions there. And then when we're done, there will be a question and answer period at the end, sort of a free-form questions and answers as we go forward, okay? So let me introduce my colleagues. So online with me right now is Professor David Goldberg from our Department of Physics. In addition, I believe Professor Don Dakar may be joining us a little bit later. He is with the professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And Professor Penny Hamrick, who's from the School of Education, I don't believe is going to be able to make it on today, but there's a slight possibility she may join us at the very, very end. But in any case, Professor Goldberg and I will be happy to talk to you and answer any questions you might have about any of the programs to the best of our ability. And if it's a question specific to another field that we can't answer, we can certainly direct you to the people who can. All right? So, an overview of today's talk. So the first thing we're going to discuss is why do a PhD? And that's really about, what is involved in a PhD? Why is a PhD very different than other degrees? We'll talk about different types of graduate programs. We'll talk about the kind of career you might expect after completing a PhD. Then we'll get to some of the more nuts and bolts where people have specific questions. Things like, what goes into an application? How do I make my application stronger? What about financial aid? We'll definitely talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about international student considerations. And then, as I said, we'll have a Q&A period at the end. All right? And again, as we're going along, please don't hesitate to type in your questions via the chat function, and we'll answer them as we go. All right. So, first slide you see there. Hopefully you see this slide. It should be a quote. It says, completing a PhD is a long, hard road with many potholes and washed out bridges along the way. You may run over some landmines and have to stop and turn around and explore other routes. If the goal is important enough to you, then these obstacles will not prevent you from completing your journey. I like this quote. The person this is from a PhD in computer science. It applies to pretty much any PhD program you go through. And the main message is this. PhD programs are especially challenging, difficult, and hard. They're not like an undergraduate bachelor's degree. They're not like a master's degree. They're very different. And it's not like a simple formula. You go take a bunch of classes and you walk out with a degree. There are some very unanticipated challenges that you're going to face, basically because when you do a PhD, you're being trained to do high quality, independent academic research. Doing that kind of research means you're answering questions that people have not answered before. Maybe you're answering an old question but with a new methodology. You're doing something really completely new and different. And as a result, there's no clear-cut what is the right answer. You might run into all sorts of blocks that prevent you from getting to the answer. And so you have to have a serious persistence, a strong motivation for working with the subject matter, working with the topic, to work your way through and complete a dissertation. So why do a PhD? Who should be doing this? If it's this hard, why would you do it? If you're the sort of person who's very passionate about research, really devoted to learning, being in an academic environment, like you get really excited about digging very deep into a specific topic and discussing the ideas until very late at night, over coffee, over wine, whatever it is. You really want to talk about physics or economics or education or engineering and discuss the ideas and try to produce something new. Well, then maybe a PhD is the right path for you to go down. And most PhDs wind up getting careers in academia, becoming a professor of some form at another university somewhere. And we'll get to that in just a second. Now, looking at different graduate degrees you could possibly get, hopefully you're seeing this chart that's up there. There's a lot of words in it, a lot of information. And I'm not going to go through every little detail, but I just want to talk about sort of the broad differences across these degrees. Let me start with a master's degree. Master's of Science, an MS, or an MA, which would be a Master of Arts. These degrees are designed for depth in a particular field, sort of advanced work above and beyond what you would get in a bachelor's program. They're good for giving you an edge in the job market above and beyond what you'd have from a bachelor's degree, or they're very good for a stepping stone into PhD programs if you need more deeper training to move on to the PhD. If you go into a master's program, it's expected you have a bachelor's, but work experience is maybe yes, maybe no, not that important. Compare that to the other two degrees on the far right column, the professional master's like an MBA, or a professional doctorate like an EDD, or a DBA, a Doctorate of Business Administration. These are degrees that are really designed for career advancement, and they expect you to come in with some significant level of work experience. So for an MBA, for example, generally nobody goes and gets their MBA until they have at least 3 years of work experience. The average is usually around 5. A professional doctorate, a DBA, normally have like 15 years of work experience, sometimes 20 years of work experience. And these are designed for going back out into industry, going back out into work, and they're designed to sort of improve your skill set so that you can do, advance in your career, move up into management. The PhD is unlike those altogether. The PhD is really designed for just doing academic level research. In general, this Master's of Science versus the PhD, the Master's gives you sort of two roads. You either use that to go into a PhD program or use that to go out into industry or government work. The PhD is really based around, again, research. That's what this is all about. And I keep emphasizing this because I've talked to quite a few people over the years who think a PhD is about going to get a job teaching, or it's about, I finished my master's, I want to learn more, let me go get a PhD, then I can go back to my job. or I can do my PhD while I'm doing my job. That's not really the case. When you choose to do a PhD, you're more or less choosing a career path of becoming a researcher. Okay, what does a PhD prepare you for? It prepares you to be a researcher. And as a researcher, you have several different opportunities here in terms of your career. Primarily, it's working in academia, publishing, doing your research and publishing your research. That's what most people at university, most professors at university do. It also enables you to become an educator. You know, you go work at a university, you do your research, but you also do the teaching and the instruction on the side. Other places you might go to if you obtain a PhD would include other places that value the types of research skills that you obtain while doing a PhD. Those will include some government jobs, those, you know, like a central bank, for example, some other government agencies will hire you. Consulting firms will also hire you because they really, really value strong research skills. All right. So at this point, I think I've talked a lot, basically just telling you that what's a PhD for? It's for learning how to do high quality research, and that's your career path. Let's get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. So what happens in a PhD program? So the first thing to be aware of, if you're not already, a PhD programs on average take 4, 5, 6 years. Most programs take more than 5 or more years. It varies by field a little bit, varies on how hard you work, varies a little bit on how lucky you get with your research topics. Typically within a PhD program, you'll be doing 2 years of coursework. First year will be a year of coursework based on what are the core things that you should know in your field. Second year of coursework may be more seminar courses where you're diving very deep into very specific topics, discussing the cutting edge research, reading papers, reading working papers, critiquing those papers, finding the holes in those papers. Where can you do better? Where are there places for doing more research? And where are the questions where we really don't know the answer to? You know, this is what you're being trained to do in the first couple of years, such that by the time you get to year 3 and moving forward, now you found, hopefully you're starting to find or have found research topics that will form part of your dissertation. Now, as you're going along and doing this, you know, most programs you will either be some form of a research assistant, you know, working with faculty, maybe working in a lab, if it's a science or engineering type of PhD, or you may be working directly as a research assistant with a faculty member in the social sciences on their research projects, or you may also be getting teaching assistantships where you're helping the faculty out with their teaching assignments. So be working closely with some form of faculty advisor, hopefully from pretty early on, often from the very first, from the first day you walk through the door. Now, at some point after the courses are done, sometimes some schools have a first-year qualifying exam or a second-year candidacy exam, sometimes both. After you've done your coursework, you have to kind of prove to the faculty through some kind of evaluation mechanism. Sometimes it's a written exam, an oral exam, a paper presentation, that you're really, truly ready to move on to do the research phase of it, to start the dissertation. Once you get through that phase, once you get through that candidacy exam, and again, those normally happen after the end of the second year, then you begin working in earnest on your own research. You'll be finding some kind of faculty mentor, your advisor, forming a dissertation committee. And once you've made sufficient progress where you have a pretty good idea what your dissertation is going to be, you get up and you present it before your faculty and often the other PhD students and say, this is my plan. This is my proposal for a dissertation. The faculty will give you feedback on this is going to work, this is not going to work. Here are some suggestions. Here are some problems you're going to have to look out for. If they approve your research plan, you move forward and you work really, really hard on that research for multiple years. And once you have it more or less ready, you get up again before the faculty and you do a dissertation defense where you show the work that you've done, you show the research you've conducted, and what your results are, and you defend, that you did a good job, that this is a quality piece of research that has contributed new knowledge to the existing body of knowledge, that you've made a real contribution. That's the end goal. All right. Throughout the PhD program, in addition to taking the courses, taking exams, and writing your research, some of the professional development activities you will be involved in would be as follows. So as you're working through it, you'll often be expected to present your research in seminars within your department or at your college. So, not just as the exam portion, but showing your research. Like, I've been working on this paper for the last 3 months. I want to show you what I've done. So you get feedback and talk to the faculty and your classmates as PhD students on how you're doing, how you're progressing and getting input. One of the things I stress with my own students in particular is that research is a collaborative exercise. Very few people these days do independent research. You're often working in a team, in a large group who are interested in very similar things to what you're doing. So you often work together. You're often co-authoring. So getting up and presenting is a really, really important skill. And PhD programs will have you doing presentations on a fairly regular basis so you learn how to communicate your research to others. As your research progresses, as you move forward, then you will be expected to go to academic conferences, so outside of your university, where you'll be presenting your research in front of faculty members, professors from other universities, from all over the world, in front of other PhD students, again, from other universities. You'll also, depending upon the field you're in, if you're in a field where grant and funding is very important to conducting the research, like if you need a big lab to conduct the research, hopefully your mentor is training you on how to obtain grants and funding so that you can conduct that research. Another place you get trained in terms of how to write good papers is learning how to referee and critique submitted papers. So when we say write a paper, what you're supposed to do with that is when it's ready, when it's complete, you submit it to a journal. The journal will take your submission, send it out to referees, usually 2 or 3. These are experts in the field, expert professors in that area who will review what you did, write back to you with comments and feedback, and basically say whether this is approved to be published, it needs some more work, so we call it revise and resubmit, or denied for one of many reasons. As when you're a PhD student, often your mentor will hand you a paper that they've been asked to referee, to give you an opportunity to sort of try your hand at looking at a piece of paper, looking at a paper, critiquing it and seeing what's good, what's bad, what needs work, what you like, what you don't like. And through that process, you're sort of learning, how to write a good paper yourself. Depending upon the institution you're at, you may get teaching experience. For example, in my own college, we require all of our PhD students to teach several classes completely independently before they graduate. That way they go out of here with a portfolio of usually about 3 classes that they've taught, so they can show universities where they value teaching very highly that you are a good teacher. And we put a lot of time into training you to be a good instructor. You also have experience perhaps mentoring some of the students who are in your lab, some of the undergraduates or the master's level students. As you move through your PhD program, you're asked to take more and more of a leadership role. And so if you, enjoy the research, but also enjoy working with others, mentoring and sort of helping to teach and lead them, this is one of the things you will get in a PhD program, is some of that experience. All right, and this is one of the more popular slides, financial aid. So there's sort of good news and bad news here. The good news is that although the cost of higher education in the United States is, it's gone up quite a bit, it's quite high. For PhD programs, there is a lot of financial aid available, a lot more financial aid available here than at any other level. Again, let me pause here for just a second and encourage you, if you have any questions, and usually around financial aid, there's often questions, please use the chat function. Type questions into the chat, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. But in any case, financial aid. A lot of PhD programs will offer you, when you get admitted, full or some partial support, okay? And that could be for 4 or 5 years, sometimes more. But full support means the university itself will pay your tuition. You won't have to pay any tuition. They will also provide you with a stipend, so you have, means to live. You don't have to take any extra jobs. And there may be additional fellowships available. At Drexel, for example, we do all that. We also provide you with a subsidy to cover your health insurance premium. And depending upon the department, there's also always some money to help you go to conferences, to travel to conferences, to present your own research. Now, some places offer what we call partial support, which means they may pay only your tuition, or they may only provide you with a stipend, and you have to pay the other part. A more common case is where the university will offer you admission, but they won't offer you any funding for 1 year or maybe the first 2 years. And that's kind of, you go in, you prove that you are worthy of the investment, and then they will find you funding if you get through maybe the first year exam, or you get through the second year exam, or by the end of the second year, you're able to come up with a good research idea. All right. So that's the good news. The good news is there's a fair amount of money available. You shouldn't, as you're applying, you shouldn't be worried about how you're going to pay for the tuition, because in most cases that's going to be covered. Now, the downside of all that is, if you think about it, I'm an economist, so I think about these things. If it's fully paid for high-level education in the US, which is really expensive, it also means lots and lots and lots of people are going to be applying. Getting into PhD programs is very competitive, much more competitive than a master's program, much more competitive than any undergraduate program. For example, in my college, we get about 400 applications every year, but we only take about 18 students. So our selectivity is on the order of about 7 or 8%, depending upon the year. And the reason it's that competitive is, one, we get people who are very interested in the types of research that we're doing, but they were able to come here to do that research, and we're going to pay them to do it. So, one of the ways you want to think about it is applying to a PhD program is, as I said before, you're choosing this career in research in this area. And when we bring you into a PhD program, we're bringing you in almost like an employee. You're here to work with us on our research team, right? We want to find people who are interested in doing the research we're doing. And those are the people we're going to go out and get. Those are the people we're going to admit. Which brings me to PhD applications. Where should you apply? Where should you go? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can sort of do your research on universities. And I will get to the most important thing momentarily. But the ways to narrow down your search, because there are hundreds and hundreds of universities here in the US, not all of them offer a PhD. So the first thing you want to check is make sure that whatever field you're interested in, they actually offer a PhD in the field. Rankings are important, but don't overweight them. The thing that's most important is what we're going to call research fit, which I'll talk a lot about. That means whatever research you're particularly interested in, you want to find universities which have faculty doing exactly what you're interested in, or as very close to it as possible, because that's where you can get trained to do that research. All right. And let me come back to that in a moment. Other ways to sort of narrow down your list, talk to people who have done a PhD. Ask them where they went. If you know alumni from institutions that interest you, talk to them. Find out what their experience was like. If you find schools that you think you're interested in, go to their website, find the email address for information, ask them for more information. They may pass your information on to faculty members or to current students, and they may reach out to you. Do go look at what the faculty are publishing. Go look at what current PhD students are doing. A fair amount of that's available on the website. And you need to do your homework here to find which places are a good fit for you. You want to go look at what faculty are doing in terms of their research, recent research. If you find papers on their website or links to papers on their website, and that's the type of stuff that really excites you, that you really want to work on, then those are the places you'd look at carefully. In addition to all of that, you know, if any of the institutions host webinars or online information sessions, definitely go check those out. Use your Education USA advising offices. I've been working with Education USA as a Drexel representative now for 5 years. They've been absolutely fantastic. Please make use of them. They have a great deal of information. How many applications should you send out? I think I need to update this slide. It varies a little bit by field. So 5 to 10 applications is normal. I think these days, because it is getting very competitive, 8 to 12 might be a better number. Again, which universities? Research matches. Of all the things in your application, the most important thing is going to be, are you a good research match for the university? Pay more attention to that than rankings or just about anything else. Other things you might want to consider include the size of the program. There's some programs out there that are absolutely huge. Many, many PhD students, which is great because you have lots of other people to work with, lots of co-authors. You have a nice community and team spirit. The downside of being in a very large program is that it may be very difficult to get to work with the faculty you want to work with because you've got a lot of competition. So you need to sort of trade that off and figure out what environment's going to work best for you. All right, so let me go specifically to what goes into your PhD application, and then I'll turn into how to make your application a strong one. In general, PhDs require some form of standardized exam. The GRE is the most common one for graduate school, for graduate programs. In some fields like business, there's the GMAT. Some others, specialty fields, may require something different. Make sure you know what is required for each university. If you are not a native English speaker, you will often be required to take one of the 2 standardized English language exams, the TOEFL or the IELTS. Many universities will waive this requirement if you have a degree from a recognized English-speaking university. Or you will be getting a degree from a recognized English-speaking university. So if any of you out there went and got a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in the United States and then went back home, that's fine. You will probably get waived. Drexel will waive that if you have any kind of degree where we know that the university taught in English. That's the key. We want to make sure that somebody coming in will do well in a classroom where the environment is all English. Your statement of purpose, as your letter to the university, is very, very important. All right. This is your opportunity to explain who you are, why you want to do the research in the field that you have chosen, why you are a good match for that particular university. Your statement of purpose is kind of like your path, your life story, which led you to this point where you have now chosen your career as an academic researcher, and that's where you're going next. Use that to talk about you as much as possible. What interests you? What gets you excited? What ideas are you, do you want to talk about like all the time? Don't spend time. One of the mistakes I see in these statements of purpose, people spend time talking about the university and the faculty and how great you think the university is and how wonderful all the faculty are. We think that already. We don't need you to tell us. What we need you to do is to tell us about you. That's what we want to hear. That's what we need to see. You will need 2, maybe 3 letters of recommendation. These ideally will come from people who have PhDs. They should come from preferably your professors. And they should come from people who have PhDs in the sense of somebody who's been through a PhD program will be in a much stronger position to judge your strengths, skills, and ability to get into a PhD program and do well in a PhD program. If you have been working for a long time and you've been a great employee and you want your boss to write you a letter of recommendation, that's fine. But it's not going to be as strong as somebody who's done a PhD. If your boss is an MBA, great, but it's not the same thing. So please be aware of that. You'll also be asked to submit your transcripts. If the transcript is not in English, you may have to have that. You'll certainly have to have it translated. And at certain points in time, you may have to have it evaluated by a professional service. Do you need a master's degree to apply for a PhD? No. A lot of fields will take you straight out of a bachelor's if you're ready. Okay. Do you need work experience? Nope, not for a PhD. This is about research. Work can help you. In some fields, it's more expected than others. In education, it's common, a little bit more common. In economics, for example, it's less common. If you have work experience that can benefit your application, if you show how your work experience is motivating the questions you want to ask as a researcher, what's your research agenda? What do you want to do? If your work experience is feeding into that, please explain that in your statement of purpose. All right, so what's going to help you get your chances of getting accepted? Any kind of research experience you have, undergraduate, master's, work, any place where you've done any kind of significant research, make sure that shows up in your CV. We want to see that you've done some research if you have. If you haven't done any research, don't worry, you're not the only ones. But you need to convince us that you really understand what research is and that you're ready to do it. Do well on the standardized exams. So the GRE, it has several sections. There's one on quantitative, one on verbal, and one on analytical writing. These are exams like you may have heard for the undergraduates. We have SATs. There's entrance exams for law school called the LSATs. For the medical school, it's called the MCAT. These exams are a basic requirement for almost all graduate programs in the United States. You should prepare for them. You should study for them. Doing really, really well, like getting a perfect score, will not guarantee you get in. Even if you got a perfect, doesn't mean you're going to get in anywhere. But a really bad score will probably guarantee that you don't get in anywhere. Do put some time into these. Letters of recommendation I talked about before, but make sure you get letters of recommendation from people who can really speak to your motivation. How good of a researcher can you be? If you're not a native English speaker and you have a letter writer who can address that, ask them to mention that in their letter. How strong your English is. After your application has been submitted normally, you'll almost certainly have an interview if you make the short list with the universities. These are important. Don't treat these lightly. If you get an interview, that means you've made the short list, and this is where a lot of decisions are going to get made. When I say an interview, if it's at a university that's close by, they may invite you to come in and visit the university for the day. Most often, though, they will find a way to talk to you, maybe via Skype or something like that. And when you explain to them in the interview, when you explain it in the statement of purpose, you got to answer the questions, why? Why do you want to do a PhD? Why this field? What motivates you? If you have the opportunity to travel and go to the universities ahead of time, during the application or before you apply, and you want to meet with some people, find their website, find the right contact information, say, hey, I'm thinking about applying for a PhD program here. Is there somebody, I'll be in town next week or in 2 weeks. Is there somebody I could talk to? We're very happy to have visitors. We're very happy to, talk to people ahead of time because it gives us a better feel for who they are and whether they're a good fit for our research programs. And again, the last bullet point there is the most important. To strengthen your application, find research fit. Find faculty who are doing research that you're interested in, and when you write your letter, make it clear that this is the type of research you're interested in. We want to bring people into our research teams. They're excited the way we are about these ideas. excited about moving knowledge forward in these areas. All right. I'm only going to talk briefly about, international student issues, talk a little bit about visas. I do want you to know that Drexel University welcomes all international students. We make a very big point of that. We have a very large international population here that we're very proud of. If you're not aware of it, Drexel is in Philadelphia, which is the 6th largest city. It's very cosmopolitan. We're happy to have all international students here. I actually have one student from Mexico right here on my floor with me. He's in his 2nd year, Oscar. He's a great guy. Now, visa types. The only thing I want to say here is there's 2 standard visa types. F1 is what most of our PhD students come on. And the most important things to note about this is when you're on an F1 and you're a PhD student here, you were restricted to only doing work on the university campus. You can't take jobs off campus. But this is why you get a stipend. This is why you're given support while you're here. The J1 visa is a little bit different. J1 visas are granted when you have somebody else paying for your education. So sometimes we'll get students who have like a government grant or some kind of foundation grant, and they're going to pay for the tuition and your stipend and all of this. If you have that kind of funding, please make sure that's noticed in your application. It can actually improve your chances of being admitted. But also note, and you should be aware of this, if you go get that kind of funding, some places require that you return back to your country to work for several years before you can do anything else. So we have this with the case of students from Brazil and students from Turkey. They are actually required to go back to their host countries to work as a professor for 5 years before they can take other jobs. So it does limit you in terms of where you can get jobs when you're done with a PhD. Oh, and just before we get to the Q&A, one last thing I want to say on this. I'm not a visa expert. However, your advisors there at the Education USA office, this is something that they deal with on a very regular basis. They're excellent at answering these questions. Please get their help if you're confused or concerned about the visa process with the United States. I know it's intimidating. We know it can be a fair amount of work. It can be scary, but we're here to help you get through it. Our Education USA is there specifically to help you get through these issues. And so please don't hesitate to ask them questions. All right, so that is pretty much all the main talk I wanted to get through. I hope I got through everything. I see that the chat has started to become active. Professor Goldberg and I are more than happy to answer any further questions you might have. And before I go away, I want to put this up here. For more information, I'm giving you a couple of links, specifically for Drexel, in terms of our graduate programs or how to get more information from us. I'm also going to type into the chat my email address if you have any direct questions for me. And in addition, for participating today, if you do choose to apply to one of our PhD programs here at Drexel, we will waive your application fee. And I will get some information out to you on how to do that. Basically, we know we will take the registration list, and after you start an application, if you just send me an email that says, I've started applying, we'll make sure you're on the list such that your application fee gets waived, okay? So are there any questions that I could answer? So there's my email address, claincz@drexel.edu. If you think of any questions at a later time. In addition, if you ever want to come back to this webinar and maybe there was something important that you missed or didn't quite get to, I'm going to save the recording of this webinar. I'm going to send it to Linda, who's been so kind to us at Education USA. and she will have that available hopefully on social media somewhere. And you can always reach out to me if there's something we didn't cover that you want to know more about. Okay, I'll give everybody, I'm not saying much, you're saying thank you. You're very, very welcome. I hope this was useful. If you thought it was useful, please tell others that it was useful so they will come and have a look at what we've done here. And I hope to hear from you in the near future. And if you're seriously considering a PhD, I hope that you will consider Drexel University. We're the Dragons. We're a big university. We're 25,000 students in a fantastic city here on the East Coast. A low-cost city, I might add. It's not as scary like New York or Washington. It's a good city. It's a fast, hot, growing city. Okay, so if there's no questions, I will ask Linda to come back on, just to, if you don't mind, just to say a few words. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming and joining us today. I'd like to thank Linda and Education USA for hosting us.
Thank you very much.
Making us available.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Chris. The information was so interesting, so important also. I'm gonna send the recording to all the students, the ones who couldn't today join us. So I'm gonna send the information to all of them. So I guess that all of the information was with a lot of details. So students, I have seen that they have some questions they ask in the chat, but also those questions were already answered. So I really appreciate that you have this interest on Mexican students, and also I appreciate about the funding and scholarships that you talk about it. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. And if you have any question, please let me know. I am in Education USA, UPAEP, Campus Central, Building A, just in front of Santander Bank. Thank you, Dr. Chris.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
The same to you. Thank you.